Racist origins. The Electoral College's structure stems from a contentious debate at the nation's founding. Why did James Madison argue that Southern states needed to count enslaved individuals to ensure their influence in presidential elections? This decision, made in 1787, continues to shape the way Americans choose their president, revealing how deeply the legacy of slavery is embedded in the U.S. electoral system. The Electoral College was created as a compromise during the Constitutional Convention in 1787, balancing the interests of slaveholding and non-slaveholding states. At the heart of this compromise was the 3/5 Compromise, which allowed states to count 3/5 of their enslaved population for the purposes of representation in Congress. This directly influenced the allocation of electoral votes, granting slaveholding states disproportionate power in presidential elections. James Madison, a key figure in the Constitutional Convention, argued for this system, stating, "The right of suffrage was much more diffusive in the northern than the southern states." His words highlight the concern that southern states would be at a disadvantage without counting enslaved individuals in some capacity. This compromise ensured that southern states could secure a significant number of electoral votes despite a large population of enslaved individuals who could not vote, thus perpetuating their political power. The impact of this decision was profound. States like Virginia, with a high number of enslaved individuals, gained disproportionate power in presidential elections. This allocation of electoral votes based on the 3/5 Compromise allowed these states to have a significant impact on the outcome of elections, effectively amplifying the voice of white slaveholders while silencing the enslaved population. Popular vote ignored. The disproportionate power given to certain states during the nation's founding has evolved into a different imbalance. In recent elections, we've seen candidates win the presidency while losing the popular vote by substantial margins. This phenomenon raises questions about the fairness of the Electoral College system and its alignment with democratic principles. The Electoral College's mechanics can lead to outcomes that diverge from the national popular vote. In most states, the winner-take-all approach awards all of a state's electoral votes to the candidate who wins the majority of the popular vote in that state. This system can result in significant discrepancies between the national popular vote and the Electoral College outcome. The 2016 election provides a good example of this disparity. Hillary Clinton won the national popular vote by approximately 2.9 million votes, yet Donald Trump secured the presidency by winning a majority of the Electoral College votes. This outcome highlights the potential for a candidate to lose the popular vote but still win the election. Critics argue that the Electoral College system disproportionately favors smaller states, as each state is guaranteed at least 3 electoral votes regardless of population. This gives less populous states more influence relative to their population size. Supporters, however, contend that the system protects the interests of smaller states and prevents a few populous regions from dominating presidential elections. Swing states. The Electoral College's complexities extend beyond state size. In recent elections, a handful of states have wielded extraordinary power in determining presidential outcomes. These battleground states have become the primary focus of campaigns, raising questions about voter equality and democratic representation. Swing states, also known as battleground states, are those where both major political parties have similar levels of support among voters. These states play a critical role in determining the outcome of presidential elections due to the Electoral College system. The disproportionate influence of swing states is evident in campaign strategies, as candidates focus their efforts on securing the necessary electoral votes in these competitive regions. The impact of swing states on election outcomes is striking. In the 2016 election, voters in Michigan had 51 times more influence on the result compared to voters in Utah. This stark disparity highlights the unequal weight of votes across states within the Electoral College system. Candidates often visit swing states multiple times during campaigns, allocating significant resources to win these crucial electoral votes. The concept of swing states is rooted in the Electoral College's structure, which incentivizes candidates to concentrate their efforts where electoral votes are most competitive. This focus on specific states can affect voter turnout and policy attention, as candidates tailor their messages to the concerns of voters in these critical areas. The emphasis on swing states also raises questions about the representation of voters in non-competitive states, whose preferences may receive less attention during presidential campaigns. Presidential electors. While swing states dominate election coverage, a group of 538 individuals wields the ultimate power in selecting the president. These presidential electors, chosen through diverse methods across the nation, play a pivotal role in America's democratic process. The Constitution allocates electors to each state based on its population size, with the number potentially changing every 10 years after the finalization of the census figures. The selection of electors varies significantly by state. Political parties typically nominate electors, often choosing loyal party members through state primaries or party conventions. This process reflects a shift from the Founding Fathers' original vision of electors as independent, knowledgeable individuals selecting the president based on merit. The role of electors has evolved, with their level of discretion in casting votes becoming a subject of debate. Historically, electors were expected to exercise independent judgment. However, modern practices often aim to bind electors to the popular vote results of their respective states. This shift has led to legal challenges and discussions about the nature of electors' responsibilities. Magic number 270. The magic number 270 remains the ultimate goal in presidential elections. What makes this specific number so crucial, and why does it hold the key to the White House? The answer lies in the mathematics of the Electoral College system. With 538 total electors, a candidate needs a majority of 270 electoral votes to secure the presidency. The allocation of electors to each state is based on its congressional representation. Each state receives a certain number of electors equal to its total number of U.S. senators and U.S. representatives in Congress. This system ensures that even the least populous states have a minimum of 3 electoral votes, while more populous states like California wield major influence with 54 electoral votes. The race to 270 shapes campaign strategies, as candidates focus on accumulating electoral votes rather than winning the national popular vote. This approach can lead to scenarios where a candidate wins the presidency without securing the majority of individual votes cast across the nation. In rare cases where no candidate reaches the 270 vote threshold, the election enters a contingent phase. The House of Representatives then elects the president, with each state delegation casting 1 vote, while the Senate chooses the vice president. This process underscores the importance of the Electoral College's design in determining the outcome of U.S. presidential elections. Faithless electors. Faithless electors, sometimes described as rogue electors, vote against their state's popular vote despite the Electoral College system relying on them to faithfully represent their state's will. But what happens when these electors go rogue? In the history of U.S. presidential elections, a surprising number of electors have cast votes contrary to expectations, raising questions about the integrity of the process. These individuals are known as faithless electors, and their actions have occurred 165 times throughout U.S. history. Faithless electors are party representatives who vote against their state's election results, either by voting for a different candidate or abstaining. While they have never swung an election outcome, their potential impact remains a concern. The 2016 election saw a notable instance of faithless electors, with 4 Washington state electors voting against the popular vote and facing $1,000 fines as a consequence. This event highlighted the legal ramifications for electors who deviate from their expected voting behavior. Historically, faithless electors have played roles in unusual scenarios. In the 1836 election, all 23 Virginia electors abstained from voting for the vice presidential nominee, resulting in the Senate deciding the outcome. The 1872 election saw 63 electors voting for candidates other than the deceased Horace Greeley, demonstrating the potential for unexpected situations within the Electoral College system. In 2020, the Supreme Court ruled that states can enforce laws requiring electors to vote according to popular vote results. This decision affirmed that electors are not free agents, addressing concerns about potential faithlessness in the electoral process. The ruling underscores the ongoing tension between the historical conception of electors and contemporary efforts to align their votes with state-level popular vote outcomes. Congressional certification. Congressional certification is the final hurdle before a president is officially chosen. This process, meant to be a mere formality, became the center of controversy in recent years. What transformed this typically uneventful procedure into a constitutional crisis? The Electoral Count Act of 1887 outlines the process for certifying electoral votes by Congress. In January following a presidential election, a joint session of Congress meets to count and certify the electoral votes. This act provides a framework for raising objections to electoral votes during this session, requiring at least 1 member from each chamber to challenge a state's results. The events of January 6, 2021 highlighted significant controversies surrounding the certification process. Some members of Congress attempted to overturn the electoral results, leading to a violent breach of the Capitol. This incident underscored the potential for political maneuvering in situations where the certification process is contested. The Supreme Court's 2020 ruling affirmed states' authority to enforce laws binding electors to vote according to their state's popular vote. This decision reinforced Congress's role in overseeing the certification process, emphasizing the importance of this last step in finalizing presidential election results. Where Congress is unable to certify the result to achieve the magic number of 270 electoral votes, which is the majority of the 538 electoral votes, then the U.S. House of Representatives votes based on each state delegation having one vote. The U.S. Senate is empowered to vote for the Vice President. Presidential inauguration. Inauguration Day is held every 4 years on January 20th or January 21st if January 20th falls on a Sunday. The ceremony is conducted at the U.S. Capitol Building in Washington, D.C. The Vice President-elect is sworn in first, reciting the same oath of office that has been in use since 1884 for senators, representatives, and federal employees. At noon, the President-elect takes the oath of office as required by Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution. In 1901, Congress created the first joint inaugural committee for the inauguration of President William McKinley. Before this, the Senate oversaw the supervision of inaugural ceremonies. Inaugural preparation and oversight had been the Senate's responsibility, largely because it is a continuous legislative body, whereas the House of Representatives reorganizes at the start of each new Congress. This system was especially relevant during the years when presidents were inaugurated on March 4th, coinciding with the convening of a new Congress. There is no evidence that the House significantly contested this arrangement before 1901.